Good morning. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. I'm Barry Bryson, and we're going to begin our study today of the Ten Commandments. We're going to take 2 or 3 sessions to introduce the Ten Commandments, and then we're going to be looking at each commandment individually. We'll have a couple of summary lessons at the end to talk about what happened after the Ten Commandments were given and the role they play in our lives today. The Ten Commandments were given by God on Mount Sinai to Moses in the presence of the children of Israel immediately following his delivery of the people from Egyptian enslavement. The people had been enslaved in Egypt for around 3 centuries, a little more than 3 centuries. And that's a long time to not have any self-determination. They were used as laborers, of course. They were not. We don't have any indication that they were treated necessarily as subhuman or bred and used like livestock, as slaves often were in the American South. But they were slaves. They were enslaved people, and their lives were completely ordered by their masters. And now they are a people of 1 million plus, maybe 2 million strong, making their way across the desert of Sinai to go to their homeland that God had given to them in Palestine. And they have to become a great nation in short order. And of course, it's not in short order. It's going to take them 40 years because of their own lack of faith. But the first thing that God needs to do is to give them a law and establish a theocracy, which he does. And so they come to Mount Sinai, the mountain where Moses encountered God, and that is associated, at least at this point, with God's presence, and God gives them a law. And it was a frightening experience for them, something that we're going to talk more about tomorrow. I want to talk today about the fact that God has given them a written law. We're moving into a different era in terms of human relationship with God. Initially, that relationship during the days of the fathers, the patriarchs, was something that was communicated directly by God, something that Hebrews 11, chapter 1, verse 1 explains to us that there were these different phases in our relationship with God. We had the spoken word, then the written word, then the living word. And the living word is Jesus himself. We're moving from the spoken word to the written word. And we're doing that because we have a new technology that is available to human beings, especially human beings on the eastern shores of the Mediterranean, and that is the technology of the alphabet. The alphabet was only ever invented once, and then it was modified countless other times. But the alphabet as a way of writing language was only invented one time, and that is by the Phoenicians somewhere in the 15 or 1600s BC. Now, these events are happening in the 12 or 1300s BC, so it is a relatively new technology, the alphabet. Using letters to symbolize sounds, using those sounds then to form words. What had been available to the people before the invention of the alphabet were the picture writing, the hieroglyphics of the Egyptians, or the wedge writing, the cuneiform of the Sumerians. And those 2 forms of writing, they were serviceable to a great extent in terms of the needs that people had for writing. Most of the reason the people needed writing was for mathematical purposes, to keep records. As civilizations became more complex and larger, people needed writing in order to keep track of who owned what and who was in charge and what were their responsibilities. And if I sell you this, these are the terms of our contract. And most ancient writing is exactly in the form of those documents. But as people began to write, they needed to express themselves and express their emotions and their thoughts and complex ideas like the notion of God. and hieroglyphics in cuneiform are not going to suffice. And so, in the same way that the New Testament arrived at the same time that written technology was revolutionized, and people went from the scroll, which I have a scroll here, went from the scroll to the book. We'll talk more about that later. God has provided the perfect time to now transition from spoken law that is highly personal between families and the written law, which can be written down and copied and disseminated, and everyone can know it, and it's fixed in its written form. And that's what he does on Mount Sinai. That's the very first thing that he has to do to build a nation, is to give them a law. And that law will contain 613 individual rules as the Jews account them in the Torah. But those 613 laws will really be an expression of the 10 commands that he gives. And he gives them in two different places. He gives them in Exodus 20, which is the first time they're given. And then at the end of Moses' career before his death, he repeats them in Deuteronomy chapter 5. And we're going to be sticking to the text of Exodus chapter 20 for our purposes in this study. When we're together next time, we're going to talk about the geographic setting and just the context, the physical context of the giving of the 10 Commandments. So we'll talk about that next time. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word.